So, welcome to Faces of Divorce, the podcast where we explore the profound impact of parental separation and divorce through the eyes of those who lived through it. Whether as children, adults, or professionals, each week we share compelling stories and expert insight that shed light on the challenges and triumphs of navigating divorce. Thank you for tuning in to Faces of Divorce, whether you're seeking support, insight, or simply a better understanding of how to navigate this difficult terrain. You're in the right place. And I am so excited today because this is not just any guest. We have Charlene Lexim, who is our HR extraordinaire, over 20 plus years of HR experience. What they call that, a serialpreneur, and a mother, daughter, best friend, friend forever. And also, she's been a client and everything. But I am going to let Charlene introduce herself to you all. So, Charlene, thank you for saying yes to
Of
Faces of
course,
Divorce. It's been a long time coming,
it has been.
probably
It has.
about like 2 years or so. We've been
We
talking about
have been
this.
talking about this for a while, but I'm excited that the day's finally here. It's going to be
Yeah,
amazing.
it is. So, let's talk a little bit about you. What do you do?
Sure. So my name is Shirley Lexime. I am a mom first. I'm a soccer mom, right? For those of you that are
Mhm.
sports or athlete parents, it is a full-time job. But it really truly brings joy to my heart to be out there on the field and screaming for my son and just traveling. So that's really fun. That takes a big part of my weeks. Professionally, I am a human resources professional, currently a director of human resources for Hilton Hotels. And I also have a HR firm where I support small businesses that are either in a growing stage or trying to ensure that they are compliant and providing HR services. So making sure that they can remain in business for a long time and years to come and maintaining that compliance. I also have another business with my two
Mhm.
friends, it's a partnership, and we have an event planning company, right? There's always a birthday or a wedding or a
Yes.
baby shower that's happening. So we support the South Florida area in that capacity. So I'm also a daughter, a sibling, I have nieces, and just an all around calm, down to earth person.
Calm down to earth, which is true. Because I know you personally, it is true. You're not just saying it, it's true. Okay. So we are going to get into it because, like I mentioned in the intro, and like being on this journey with me, that we are about divorcing different, making
Right,
sure that people understand that there's a better way to go through the process, which
right.
you'll touch on throughout our conversation at some point during our conversation, and having support and knowing that it doesn't always look pretty, it doesn't always feel good, it has its twists and turns and even the unexpected, but
Absolutely.
there is a way to go from trials to triumph. So that is the
Right.
goal today. And I know that we're going to hit some topics, some fun,
Absolutely.
some not so fun, but let's get into it. So can you describe, like, how was it growing up
Sure, sir.
in your
So
household?
I
So your
actually
household.
grew up, absolutely. I actually grew up in a really big family. I had aunts and uncles, my grandmother, my stepdad, my siblings, and then I never lived with my dad because my parents were separated from when I was, I believe, maybe 2 years old. But then later in life, I got introduced to my dad and his family. So it was a really big family, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there were some toxic moments, of course. There's a lot of moments of laughter, right? I always tell my
Yeah.
siblings, I remember when we were younger, we would drive around Miami Shores because we lived in that area and watch the Christmas lights when we were picking up my mom and
Mm-hmm.
just running for the ice cream truck, different moments
Yeah.
of laughter. So there was definitely happiness. However, there was a lot of toxicity where I would watch my aunts and uncles argue, and
Yeah.
I would watch my mom and my stepdad fight. Um, I would watch my stepdad, his girlfriends would drive by the house and my mom would
Mm.
not be happy about that. So that would lead to different arguments.
Yeah.
So I definitely saw a little bit of everything growing up.
Okay. And you said that from an early stage, from early on in your life, your parents were not living in the house together. How do you think, if you can think back, or maybe you've already reflected on this, how do you think that that shaped your early understanding of marriage and love and relationship?
Well, see, so my dynamics is a little different because my mom, okay, so the way the story is, so my mom, my stepdad is my older sister's dad, right? So it
Okay.
was my stepdad, who, wasn't in the picture. Then it
Yes.
was my dad that was in the picture. And then my brother and myself came along, and
Mhm.
then that didn't work. So then my stepdad got back in the picture. So up until
Okay,
I was about
interesting.
age 11 or 12, my stepdad was in the household.
Yeah.
And we still had a good relationship. Even my stepdad had a good relationship with my dad. So um, I think for me, what I grew up seeing, which was a lot of the fighting between
Mhm.
aunts and uncles and my mom and my stepdad, because my mom and my dad had a good relationship. They were still good
Okay.
friends.
Well, that's
Um,
good.
I think yes, that was really good. And my dad's smart heart, right? He's passed
Hmm.
on. He
Yeah.
was truly an amazing dad. But I think growing up and seeing a lot of the toxicity and
Hmm.
the division, I think that shaped for me wanting different, right? I wanted to have like that white picket fence and the
Yeah.
family and the dog, right? Because I didn't grow up seeing that. So
Hmm.
I think for me, that's kind of what's my early understanding of it. It's like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This doesn't always feel good. I think I want this instead. And
Yeah.
for us growing up, being a girl, you watch all the Disney movies,
Yeah.
Cinderella or Family Matters. Like I did see it right on
Uh-huh.
TV, but not necessarily in the household. But I knew that looked good on TV.
Now, with you mentioned that you kind of like went through things that I'm assuming you were referring to as toxic. You said your aunt and uncles fighting, but specifically your mom and your stepdad, that there would be women that drive by. So that means it was clearly known by the family that there was some infidelity there with your
Yes,
stepfather
absolutely.
and your mom.
Absolutely. There would be times where my stepdad would be out of the home for maybe a week, and then he'll be after a huge fight, and then he'll come
Mhm.
back. And then there would be times where, yes, you would see the women driving by, screaming and yelling. My mom would be yelling back. And yes, it was like a little insane sometimes.
Did they end up divorcing? Did they stay together? What ended up happening
You
with that
know,
relationship?
So they never ever divorced, right?
Okay.
But my stepdad was out of the home, I think, when I went to middle school. So I went to middle school and my
Uh-huh.
older siblings went to high school. So that was the last time that we saw our stepdad.
Okay.
And but they never divorced and went to
Mm.
court and followed the processes. They just were never together anymore until my
Did
stepdad passed away.
did you ever look up to your stepdad as a father or just more your father as a father
No,
figure?
I did actually. He was
Okay.
actually, I think with the children, he was
Yes.
good, right? Even though
Mm-hmm.
technically biologically I was not his daughter and neither was my
Yes.
older brother. He still was always there for us, right? My stepdad
Mm-hmm.
would pick us up from school. He would take
Uh-huh.
me to different events that would happen at the later time because my mom worked a lot.
Okay.
He would, again, whenever he'd want to pick up my mom, he would drive around. Let's say there's a little bit of time before she gets off. So
Yeah.
we would drive around Miami Shores and look at all the Christmas lights. And my siblings and I say, that's my house. That's my house. That's my house.
Yeah.
Right. So those memories were great, right? He would, take us for ice cream, order
Okay.
pizza. So he was definitely, when he was in the home, he was a
Yes.
good step.
Okay. Did you maintain a relationship with him even after he left the home though?
No, we didn't. I think that was the time before cell phones. So
Yeah.
just a completely, I think maybe now, if things would have happened now, maybe we could have maintained a relationship,
Yeah.
but in those days we didn't. Once he left the home,
Okay.
he moved to Broward. We were still living in Miami, and we just never really saw him again.
Okay. And I know you were younger because you mentioned that you were middle school age. Your siblings were high school by the time that he left the house.
Right.
Did you, in your mind, because it was just a lot going on. Now you're saying that technically they never got divorced, but as a child, did it come to your mind like divorce, being separated, and that would never be me, and things like that? Did you ever think that way when you
Oh,
were younger?
absolutely. Absolutely. I
What were
think
those
from a very,
conversations like in your mind?
you know what my earliest memory of family in my home, like my own family, I can say, like once you grow up and you get
Yeah,
married, have the beautiful dress, etc., was I remember sitting in my living room. I couldn't be older than 5 or 6, right? And
yeah,
again, at that age, I had already been exposed to a lot of the arguing and fighting in the household.
yeah,
Um, and I just remember, and we lived in a house that, wasn't like a beautiful home, right? We grew up in
yes.
a harder part of the neighborhood. So I
Okay,
would always dream of, a house that was repaired,
okay, okay.
that had, everything that you see on television, right?
Yeah,
Upstairs, or 2 bathrooms, right? We had, at
yeah.
one point, we had 2 bathrooms, and I think it was 11 or 12 of us in the house.
Oh,
So
wow. Hmm.
fighting for the bathroom. Um, we didn't really have a backyard, right? We had a front yard, but it was mainly
Yes,
rocks, right? So I
yeah.
would envision like the grass, and we were playing, and then having,
Hmm.
that the husband there, and having multiple children and the
Yeah.
dog. So it had to have been at least 5 or 6. That was my early memory of what I wanted because of what I saw in the home and what I saw on TV.
Okay. Did you, at the time where all of what you refer to as toxic things, the back and forth, them not getting along, and all of that, did you ever think about while you were a child, why don't they just leave? Like, why does she keep dealing with this? Did that ever come to your mind?
Now that I think about it, I don't think so. I think it was normal for me. I think
Mm,
when my stepdad finally left the house,
yes.
I just thought he was coming back, because there were times where he left for,
Yeah.
a week or two, and he would always be back. So it, to me, was very normal that, you argue, you fight, you disagree, but then you come back together, and it makes sense. So I never thought, why not just leave?
Okay. Do you think your childhood influenced in any way the kind of partner that you chose?
That's a good question. I think, I don't know that it influenced the type of partner I chose, but I
Mhm.
think maybe I thought I was ready when I really wasn't ready,
Mm,
right? Because I wanted, that quote unquote perfect life or perfect
yes.
family. And
Yes.
maybe, once I saw enough that led me to believe that, okay, this is great, and this is, the direction you should move
Hmm.
in, then I went into that direction. So I don't know that it shaped who I chose, but maybe the timing, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. So let's continue on that path. How did
Okay.
you meet your husband, your ex-husband now, but at the time, how did you get into that relationship?
So it's the most romantic story. I'm
Uh-huh.
really kidding. We lived in the same area, right? So we lived in the
Yes.
same. We had moved from Miami into the northern part of Miami, and
Okay.
he lived in the area. And I had just left school. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I had just left school, and I
Left
was in college
school,
at
what
the time.
grade? What do you mean left
I
school?
was I was a sophomore in college, right?
Oh,
So I
okay.
went to Johnson and
Yes.
Wales University. Johnson and Wales wears uniform at the time, right, with your name
Okay.
tag. So I
Yes.
had just gotten home. I was tired, and my older brother, who I love dearly, right,
Yes.
he's always running late to work, always.
Hmm.
And he said, please, 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 can you run to the ATM at 7-Eleven and get me some money? And I was like, what? I just got home. I'm exhausted. Like, please,
Uh-huh.
please, please. And he's like rushing to like jump in the shower,
Uh-huh.
because he had just enough time just to get to work. So I said, "Ugh, okay." So I drove to the gas station, which was less than 2 minutes away.
Hmm.
And it was around Valentine's Day. So they had all the little teddy bears out. So
Yes.
I'm waiting in line, and my ex-husband is there, and he's
Yeah.
using the ATM.
Hmm.
I'm patiently waiting, and I go and I forget the PIN number that my brother told me to use
Yes.
for the card. So I called him. I was like, "What was the PIN number again?" He said he gives me the number, and he's like, "By
Yeah.
the way, can you add a Gatorade to that?" And I'm like, "Seriously?" So long story short, I grab the money, I
Mhm.
go get the Gatorade, and now I have to wait in the cashier line to check
Yes.
out. And then my ex-husband at the time was there, and that's when he sparked up a conversation. And it was centered around school because I was in my school
Okay.
uniform and not even taking off my name tag. So we just started up a conversation about school, and then it continued from there. And then we just it
Okay.
blissfully
So
fell in love.
what drew you to him though? Because we have a lot of conversations with a lot of people.
Right.
But what about him? What drew you to him?
I think it was the genuineness of the conversation, right? He was also he had was going through a transition period in his life.
Okay.
He was also in school.
Mhm.
He was a follower of Jesus, and
Yeah.
we connected on different topics that were important for a young. I think I was maybe 20 at the time, maybe
Yes.
19, 20.
Hmm.
Um, it didn't seem to be just about surface. Like there were
Yes.
some deeper conversations about goals and visions and what you want in life, like,
Hmm.
finishing school, of course, having a
Yeah.
nice career and,
And this was
loving
over
Jesus.
time, though. This was over
Right.
time throughout as you guys were learning each other. You enjoyed that fact that you guys
Exactly.
can meet, like you're meeting at the same point of wanting more and
Exactly.
being okay. Okay. And so now you guys are dating, it's getting good. You're telling everybody about it, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be? Um, so, what was the thing? So, now that you got to the place of we're serious, we're going to do this, what made you say yes when he proposed? Or was there a proposal? Like, I don't
There
know. Tell us.
there was a proposal. It was at a bowling alley, and then everyone showed up, and he was on the microphone, and he asked me to marry him. I was like, "What? You all knew about this and didn't tell me? I don't like surprises. How did this happen?" But it was a nice, romantic proposal.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him when I realized like how selfless he was. Right. So,
Mm,
in that time of our dating, there were many different examples and experiences where he was, very selfless.
uh-huh,
um, I got baptized, during that
mm,
time, and he would always, we would always talk about Jesus and God. And at the time, I wasn't going to church because my family, growing up, I didn't necessarily go to church with my
yeah.
family. And with him, we started that together, and
Hmm.
it just felt right at the time. I
Yeah.
think again, he just showed that he was invested in the relationship and he was selfless. Um, so I said, okay, yes. And we always talked about different things that we wanted if we were ever married, like the family
Yeah.
and building together and growing together. So it felt right at the
Okay, now everybody, well, let me just say everybody, right? Can't generalize, but I
time.
know
Right.
that I've heard a lot, like when you know that it's kind of coming, you're getting more serious, or even the moment you say yes, was there any doubt? Was there any like, I guess I love him, but I should be getting married yet?
You know
Because of
what?
maybe the past or anything.
I don't think I ever felt doubt throughout because we were engaged for about 2 years, right? I think we
Yeah,
dated for three, engaged for two until the final big day. I
yeah.
don't think there was any doubt throughout that time until the day before the wedding. And that's scary
Wow.
because it's like everything's paid for,
Yes.
everyone's flying in, or family, the church family is coming, and,
Mhm.
all the bridesmaids are ready. Like, what do you mean?
I
But
was
here's why I
flying
felt
in. Remember, I had to fly in for
I
long
do
story.
remember you do. You came down and you were ready. And I was
Yes.
like, but the reason why I felt that it was strange, right? So that day, there was a lot happening, of course, the day before the wedding.
Yeah.
You have a lot to do, your nails, and you're running around. And then I had been up very early. And then I was taking my friend home. And it was maybe after midnight for sure, closer to 1 p.m.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, my car stopped.
Mm.
My car stopped very late, dark area, and I was, panicking, and
Uh-huh.
we pulled over to the side. We managed to move over to the side.
Yeah.
And I remember calling and calling and calling and calling him, and there was no
Mm-hmm.
answer. There
Mm.
was no answer. And I was like, oh, he's supposed to come to my rescue. Like, I'm
Mm.
calling and calling and
Yes.
calling. And so finally I called my brother, and my brother was he had just gotten married the year before. His
Yeah.
wife was pregnant. He had a
Mm.
dog. So he came from Broward all the way to Miami to
Mm-hmm.
help figure out what was wrong with the car.
Yeah.
And wait there with me for AAA and
Yes.
everything. So that, I think that was the first time where I felt like you weren't even there. You couldn't even answer. And
Mm,
I had not heard from him until the next day, like the next morning. I mean, by then we're already into the
yeah.
next day, right? It's closer to 2 a.m. now. I think
Mm-hmm.
I got home at like 5 a.m. that morning, and I had to
What?
be up for my hair at 8. And I
How
think it was
did you even know
maybe
this story?
I'm telling you, it was crazy. And I started thinking like maybe this was a sign. And
Wow.
I'll never know if it was or
Yeah.
isn't, but that's
But
what it
did you,
felt
but how did you
like.
push that out your mind though? Because your mind was there, but was it the fact that everything is just too planned at this point? Or did you feel like I'm being irrational? What was it that got you out
I
of that
did think I
headspace?
was being irrational. Like, look, your car just stopped. He was probably out with his friends, just like you were
Yeah.
out with your friends, and maybe they're sleeping, and maybe there's just no connection that, hey, it stopped because you can't move forward. It's telling you stop. So
Mm,
I think I finally just said, okay. I was still upset. I'm not gonna lie, I was very
yeah.
upset, and like, how could you not even answer?
Hmm.
But I went through it, and I didn't.
So you said it was 2 years. So 2 years of you guys being engaged. During the time that you guys were engaged, did you have those conversations about expectations in the marriage?
When I think more about that, I don't think
Hmm.
so. I don't think we were very clear. I don't think we had intentional conversations about
Mm. And give
expectations.
me an example. What would have been a more intentional conversation you could have
Um, I think had we discussed more about work-life balance,
had?
right?
Mm,
Or values, like what are those values that our family would stand on,
yeah.
right? Well, the
What is the
conversation that I remember.
value? You mentioned value. I don't want to skip over that. You mentioned value. What value that you can think of at that time that was important that ended up being missing in the marriage that had you address that, maybe it would have made a difference? Can you think of anything?
Sure, I would say respect.
Mm.
I think having like real, like what is, because people can say respect, respect, but what
Yeah,
does that
because that's so
mean?
general, right? But yeah.
Exactly. What does that really mean? Right. But I think those types of words really show up in the difficult times, right? Like,
Yes.
what does respect really look like when, someone's out of a job, or there's
Mm,
financial struggle? Or what does respect really look like when you're tempted by another person? Or what
mm,
does respect really look like when you know we disagree on a parenting you know situation in the moment,
mm.
right? Do you
Wow.
discuss that in front of the child? Do you wait? Do we discuss it after? Right. So we definitely didn't have those types of intentional conversations. I
Yeah.
think the most basic conversations that we had was we want 4 kids,
Yeah.
and we want to build, we want to continue to grow,
Yeah.
financially, of course,
Yeah.
education wise, of course, um, but nothing specific. And we didn't really talk about time, like balancing time. What does that look like, right?
Mm.
Because as you aspire to have a great career, as to is he,
Yes.
what does that look like when you do bring children into the mix? And um
Because you knew
there
that you
definitely
wanted to
weren't.
go corporate, right? Like you wanted to work
Right,
for larger, not smaller. But that
right.
did that ever come up? You're saying that
No,
never came up?
no,
Mm, okay.
that never came
And
up. So it was more so just the surface, right? We just knew
yes,
we were young, we were very ambitious, we wanted
yes.
to, be the go-getters and thrive and succeed at life, but we never really talked about the hard stuff. Like, okay, what if this was to happen? Like, how would you, what's your thought on this? Like, what's your
Mm,
perception on this? Or, we never talked about it. So I think when we started to face those things, it became like a shocker, like, wait a minute.
so so based on what we're, I don't want to assume, right? So
Mhm.
based on what you just said and how you broke down one of those values that was very important, obviously, in so many areas, you're able to tie it to so many areas. So we know you've done a lot of homework since, right? The
Right.
way you were able to tie it to. But do you believe that when you were going into the marriage, although some things weren't discussed, But how do you feel about understanding what it would take, though, to make the marriage work? Did you at least feel like you understood what that would take?
I think I understood what, for me personally, I think
Yes.
I am very driven, right?
Yes.
And I don't give up very easily. So I
Yeah.
think for me at that time, no, because you know, you're at the altar and you're saying your vows, like, you know, for better, for worse, for sick or poor. I don't think those words really resonate, you
Uh-huh.
know, in that moment until you really face those issues, right? Or have
Yes.
had thought and really deep discussions prior. But
Exactly.
I think for me, I think, like, how do I best explain this? I would say I just knew I'm not going to give up, right? So whatever
Mm,
comes my way, I'm
you're
always
gonna be.
going to push forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never give up in other areas of my life, like, you know, with family. If I'm always going to be
Yes.
there for them, or school, I'm going to push through. So I knew
Yes.
in my marriage I would do the exact same thing, right? And hope that
Okay.
it'd be reciprocated. So I think that's something that I knew for sure, um, but not necessarily, you know, all
Everything
the
that
other
it would take.
components.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. How much it would take after going through it. Now,
Right.
so throughout the marriage, I know that you're saying that you're now facing things that one wasn't discussed, and
Right.
things that had they been discussed, one, you either would have been prepared for it or maybe it would have been a sign. I don't know how you take it now, but while you're in the marriage, so now you're in the marriage, you're going through the motions. Um, how soon did you have children in your marriage?
Immediately. Immediately. So my
Okay.
son was born 10 months into our marriage.
Okay,
So
so there wasn't that let's
right.
get to know each other in marriage time for you all.
Right. There was none of that. It was like, hey, all right, wham wham, you know. So he
so
came very
So how was that dynamic? How did it change? So for those 10 months, how did having your first child, and how many children do you have?
just one.
One. So
Right.
with your child, when your child was born, um, how did that affect the dynamic?
Well, you know, when you, because we were young, we were
Yes.
25 and 28, right?
Yes.
And I think you, if you know, for those of you that have kids,
Mm,
right, when they're born and you go from, you know, doing whatever you want as far as your sleep
mhm.
schedule, waking up when
Yes.
you please, coming back home when you please. And not that we did that in our
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
right? There was respect there, but and you're waking up every 2 hours, 1 hour, hour and a half to feed,
Hmm.
it gets exhausting.
Yes.
So I think that was definitely a surprise to us.
Yes.
And, you know, I think we balanced it well. But
Uh-huh.
then my ex at the time started working an overnight job. So then it was really just me
Mm,
during those difficult moments. So I think it definitely threw I hate to say wrench because I love my baby and I know he loves his
yeah.
son very much so
Of
too,
course.
but it definitely challenged our relationship when, you know, you can't just get up and go, right? You
Yes.
have to take care of a little blessing that, you know, God gave us, and
Hmm.
it requires a lot of attention, a lot of money and
Yes.
finances to be navigated in order to do it successfully. So I think it definitely challenged the relationship.
So, what were some of the highs, like the things that can be celebrated within your marriage?
So we're big on birthdays. So our birthdays are very
Mhm.
close. I think 10 days apart each way, right? I'm
Yes.
right in the middle. So we would always do something together. We would always, and I work in hospitality, so I would
Okay.
have great hotel rates. So we would always stay at different hotels and travel and just celebrate our birthdays together.
Yes.
There was always Sunday dinner at my in-laws, so we would always go and do
Okay.
Sunday dinner, you know, and just relax and watch games or TV or movies, or go to church, of course,
Hmm.
and um, you know, just live life. We would always stroll the mall with the baby, and he'd be in
Okay.
a stroller. We would stroll with him and
Uh-huh.
just look at stuff. A one way to get out the house, because in our relationship, that's something that we always did: stroll the mall or stroll the park. So we continue
Okay.
that
Oh,
into
that's
our
good.
marriage and after my son was born. So
How was the
those are
love
some of the
life?
highs.
What about your love life? Like love making, all of that. It was.
Oh yes, that definitely existed for sure.
Mhm.
Sometimes someone else's libido is a little bit higher, especially when you
Yeah,
have
obviously.
um, a child and, for, the mother, your
Yeah.
hormones are a little out of whack and,
Hmm.
the exhaustion level is a little bit high, but definitely there was still a lot of that. I would plan like romantic dates and nights. So
Yeah.
that
Okay.
definitely continued on.
All right. Now, when did you start feeling, and when I say when, you can say incident, but the time in marriage too. So how many years in were you and all that when you answer this question? So think about that. So
Okay.
when did you start feeling that your marriage wasn't working? Like something's off?
So my son was 3, right? So let's see. We were married in 2009. So I think
Uh-huh.
2013, right?
Okay.
So sometime, well, maybe late 2012 into 2013,
Yeah.
we would, I started to feel like my ex-husband would have arguments just to
Okay.
leave the house.
Mm,
And I didn't pick up on it. I was like, why are we arguing about this? This really doesn't make sense. And I can't say that was I not listening or did I really just, resort to thinking that he's doing it on purpose?
yeah.
I'm not sure now, but what I can say is that fast forward maybe a year later is when I discovered the infidelity, right? So that's where it became apparent to me because I never, we could have had any other issues in our
Yeah.
marriage. I never, ever would have suspected infidelity, more so because of um, the faith base and how we
Yes.
connected on that level. And we always knew that that was not an option.
Yes.
Um, I was very confident and comfortable. So was he. So it's like, wait a minute, right? So that came
Mhm.
as a big shocker to me in the relationship.
Okay. Now, when that happened, what did you do? Did you guys take steps to work on it? Because we don't know, like from that to actually divorcing, like how much time was that?
Oh,
The,
right.
the
So
span of time.
so we were married 10 years, right? About 11, I think, when the divorce was final. So that happened about 3 years into our marriage.
Okay.
And, what happened? So,
That's another 6 to 7 years.
right,
Okay.
right. So
Mhm.
early on, when the first incident took place, it was immediate reaction was, frustration, anger,
Exactly.
hurt, pain, of course. And then I think on his end, I don't want to speak for him, but I think there was definitely like, a shock or surprise and wait a minute, and
Mhm.
then we went our separate ways, right? So we were separated for some time. At that moment, I didn't want a divorce. I really wanted my family.
Okay.
So, but I was still very hurt and
Yeah.
very, much so surprised. And
Hmm.
where do we go from here? Where do we pick up? What pieces are we
Exactly.
picking up? And how do we move forward? So I think we were separated for about 8 months. And when we finally got back together, we decided with counseling, of course, we
Okay.
decided, okay, we're going to continue on
Yeah.
and, never to cross this path again as far
Hmm.
as being in the same situation where we're facing the same issues because it happened again.
Okay.
So yeah, that was immediate action and then how we got back together to continue on.
So, what it brings my mind to, and what probably the listeners thinking about, we talked about your childhood and we talk about how your mother faced this. Did it immediately bring those things back to you? Did you start thinking about your mother's situation? And what did it do to your mental health as well?
I don't know that I thought about my mom in that
Mm.
situation, but or what I witnessed, I should say, when I was a
Yes.
child. But to infidelity is something that really impacts you mentally.
Yes.
You start to blame yourself, right? You start to say,
Mm.
what was I doing? You start to not feel pretty enough or
Mm.
beautiful. You start to feel all of these things. You start to be obsessed with what is it about the other person, right? What does she
Mm.
have? Or, what is it that he was drawn to? And then
Yeah.
I had to realize, like, okay, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
And it's not you, right?
Okay.
In
Okay.
that
What helped
capacity,
you,
at
but what
least.
helped you get from what is it about her? Is something I'm lacking to it's not about you. What get you from that point to that point?
Honestly, I think it was a conversation with my brother.
Okay.
So during the separation, the early parts of the
Yes.
separation, I was so obsessed with, I think it was Facebook at the time. I was
Yes.
looking up her name, the other person's name, and looking at
How did you get
Facebook.
her name?
So, okay, so let me
You did?
rewind, right?
Okay. I
So,
mean, just for the listeners to understand, because some of the questions is, well, how did she find out? Where did so
of
just some of those
course,
things because people can connect with that too. Hmm.
of course, of course. So the story is, so the day I found out, right?
Yes.
When they say a woman's intuition, right, never
Yes.
lies, like it's really, really strong, right?
Uh-huh.
I can't say it never lies, but it's definitely very strong.
Yes.
So there was, my husband at the time was a truck driver.
Yes.
So it was not unusual for him to be out for periods of time. But there was one specific weekend where he was supposed to be in town. He came in and said, "Oh, I'm gonna step out. I'll be back." So
Okay.
we had been still rocky. So I said, "Okay, I'll cook, and my son's at his grandparents, so we can talk and have an
Yes.
intimate moment, and hopes of working things out." But he
Okay.
never came home, and
Mm.
I'm home. I go to sleep, and I am I can't sleep. I'm
Yeah.
filled with so much unrest. I keep getting up and then I go back to sleep and I keep getting
Uh-huh.
up. And I just started thinking like, why is he not home? Right. Then I start to connect the
Exactly.
dots. And I'm like, what's going on? I go back to sleep. But something was saying, you know why he's not home. You just don't want to
Mm.
face it. And I was like, stop, go back to sleep. So I go back to sleep,
So you're talking to
wake
yourself.
up,
This is the conversation, internal
be
conversation. Uh-huh.
exactly between myself and my mind. I was just like, oh goodness, it just would not leave. So I something finally told me, just check the phone records. I mean, you know how to find it. And I've
Yeah.
never been the one to like, stalk phone records and where were you? Where you at? What you doing? Never. Right.
Yes.
But that moment I felt strongly led to check it. And as
Okay.
much as I, declined that strong feeling, I finally did it. And I noticed phone records of conversations with a random phone number for, I think it was like 118 minutes. So I started to do the math. I was like, okay, so there's 60 minutes in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 hours plus 12. What? Okay. So I was like, wow, that is a long time,
Yes.
or close to 2 hours, I should say. And I saw
Yes.
some
Yes.
like 156, or I was like, what is going on? And I said, let me just go to sleep. I'll just have to
Mm-hmm.
ask him about it and he'll explain it.
Exactly.
Something I woke right back up. It's like, well, you know how to find it. You just put the number in and search it on Google and see who it
Yes.
belongs to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, let me do it. And then you had to pay and put a card in. I think it was like $1.99. I'm not paying for
Yeah.
this. This is crazy. I'm crazy. Go back to sleep. And I
Mm.
woke back up.
Yes.
All this was probably between maybe midnight and 3 a.m.
Okay.
And I'm also calling him, like, answer the phone, don't answer the phone. Like he's
Okay.
like not responding back, no text messages. And then you can see if the message is read. So I was like, you
Oh,
see
okay.
it, but you're not
Mm-hmm.
responding, right? So finally I decided to get my card and pay the 199 to see.
Okay.
And then I saw it belonged to an individual that lived in Palm Beach, which is where he said he was going to go drop off his partner earlier in the day, but should have been
Oh,
back.
okay. Okay.
So then I was like, okay. So at that point, I was able to finally sleep. All right.
Yes.
Because I learned it and I was like, okay, that
You
doesn't
knew a
make
little
sense.
more at that moment. Like, okay.
Exactly. So then he finally calls back. I think it's 4 a.m., a little after 4. And
Yeah.
then he's talking as everything's normal. He's saying, oh, yeah, I just was hanging out with my co-driver and what's going on.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And I said, well, who's such and such?
Yeah.
I presented the name and he
Yeah.
just froze. He was very surprised and he
Mm.
was saying, oh, that's just a friend. I was like, okay, well, let me call her and let her know that, your
Yeah.
wife
So
is
yes.
home. And then he was upset. He was like, no, why would you call the person? Da, da, da. And that's when I knew.
Okay.
So at
Okay.
that point, I knew, okay, this is definitely something. He came home and, I was just so emotional, so upset.
Yes.
And he, got his things and left, and we were separated for 8 months.
Okay. Then you mentioned, let me bring you back to where you were. You mentioned
Mhm.
that it was something that your brother told you that
Right.
made you realize that it wasn't you. What is that?
So I was super obsessed with looking up this person, right? I was
Yes.
looking up the name and how old are they? Where are they from?
Hmm. Yes.
Everything. And I would also look at the records, right? I would look
Okay.
at
Okay.
the AT&T records of the phone calls and the
Okay.
conversations, and also the tracker. I promise you, I'm not a
Oh,
stalker, but I did do
that's
that
your
at that
husband.
time,
That's your husband. Yes.
just for a short window.
Yes. Yes.
And I kept looking at it and looking at it, and then I would obviously see things that I already knew, right? Like, yeah, he's
Okay.
there,
Mm-hmm.
or he's spending a lot of time here, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And my brother said, he was like, "Why are you torturing yourself?"
Mm.
He said that to me. He's like, "Why are you
Yes.
torturing yourself? You already know what it is, right?
Yes.
So when you're looking at it, right,
Mm-hmm.
it was putting me in a very difficult emotional space,
Yes.
and it was, you know, just unhealthy." And he
Yes.
just kept saying, like, why are you doing this to yourself? He's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Listen, it could be Beyonce, it could be a celebrity,
Exactly.
it
It didn't
could
matter.
be
Mm-hmm.
anyone, it doesn't matter, right? You are you, right? You guys
Yes.
had a covenant together, and he chose
Yes.
to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about that person means that you're lacking in something. So stop torturing yourself." And that was a
Mm.
time where I stopped looking. I literally, what do you call it? Like, separate the phone records. I said, you know, you have your own line, I'll
Oh,
have my
okay.
own line. So that way I didn't have to, you know, get caught up with, like, let me just see today. You know, you could do good for like 2 weeks, and then you go back.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm gonna cut this really.
So hold on. Let's pause in that moment. So you were intentional enough because you can say, just like you say, you can say, well, I'm just not gonna look. I'm not gonna look, but I'm still gonna make it available to me. But you were intentional enough and you knew yourself, being honest to
Right,
yourself, to
right,
say, listen, I know if it's here, I'm gonna default to that, and then it's gonna bring me back into this place that I don't want to
right.
be in. So you actually just remove the temptation. Like you
I
took it away
did.
completely.
I did. And
That is
that's
awesome.
when I really started to dig deeper, right? In myself, and I wasn't
Mhm.
so much immersed with what's he doing or what's going on
Yes.
there, with everything that I already knew. And I started to focus a little bit more on myself and my son, because I think maybe 3 months into the separation,
Yeah.
and I started to accept the fact that, okay, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? I'm willing to try, but I'm not going
Yes.
to continue to. At that point, I was also calling him, like, when are you coming back home? Like, what are you doing? You know, I was
Yes.
also doing that. So I just stopped,
Okay. Okay. So you
and
did
I
communicate.
poured
Mhm.
more into myself. I joined a different church, and I started doing different classes, different devotionals,
Yeah.
journaling, and I just started to pour more into myself. And it wasn't about anyone else other than me, and
Okay.
healing and through that process.
So divorce wasn't an immediate answer for you because after that 8 months, you guys got back together, like we said, for
Right.
almost 6 years. So how did you? What was it that made you get back together? What happened?
Well, he apologized, right?
Yes.
And he was honest about what was happening with him
Yes.
internally and why he chose to go that route.
Okay.
Um, but I think what really did it for me is that he not only apologized to me, he apologized to my brother, right,
Yes.
and my family. So which I didn't think he,
Mm,
I mean, now I think that is something that, you know, someone should do, especially if you had that relationship with the family.
exactly. Hmm.
But at the time, I didn't think that's something, I didn't require that. I guess that's the
Okay.
best
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
way
Yeah.
to explain it. But then when I learned that and then he didn't come and tell me, oh, by the way, I apologize to your family. You know, it's my
Yeah.
brother that told me after the fact. He's like,
Oh
yeah, you know, we had a
wow.
heart conversation. And I was just like, okay, well, I guess he's serious about this. He loves his, you know, child, of course.
Hmm.
So, you know, maybe, and again, I wasn't ready to throw it. I mean, I don't want to say throw it all away. I wasn't ready
Yeah.
to let go. I really wanted still my family. From
Yes.
thinking back as a little girl, I didn't want what's called a broken family, quote unquote.
Exactly. Hmm.
Um, so we got back together. It was right around our birthdays,
Okay.
and we did our normal celebration. We went to
Hmm.
a hotel and had a hotel staycation with my
Yeah.
son. And, you know, continued the path of working together and therapy. Of course, we did therapy at our new church.
Okay, so that's good. So now, over that period of time, well, you said one of the highs, you guys went back to celebrating. So you're
Right.
celebrating birthdays, coming back together. Obviously, you had that united um, you had that united thing of your child, having your child, raising them together, and both wanting a family that is not broken. Now, I didn't ask you in the beginning, but what was his family dynamic? Did he have both parents in the household growing up? Was that,
Yes.
are they even still married, his parents?
Yes, actually. So
Oh,
both
okay.
parents in the household still married, great family. Actually, I still have a great relationship with the family.
Oh, that's
They're
awesome.
always there to support. They come to my son's soccer games,
Mhm.
graduation. They're always present. So they're amazing, and I'm truly blessed to keep that relationship going with them.
Okay. So, what are some of the things that happen on the second half after separation that ultimately led you to start considering that divorce was an option?
I think so. I think so. This happened in 2013. We got back together
Yes.
2014 after 8 months of separation. It
Yeah.
was okay for a while, and then slowly but surely, I think deep down, because I think once the gates are open to
Mm,
infidelity and it's happened, you start to have that little thought in your mind, like, is it happening again? Whether that's
okay.
insecurity or the lack of trust, it
Yeah.
still exists somewhere, no matter how much you try to, at least for me how much I
Yes.
tried to suppress it, there was always that thought, right? Now, I
Yeah.
wasn't saying, every 2 minutes if he was not there, where were you? What's going on? Where you at? I
Yes.
wasn't doing any of that. But I was checking phone records,
Okay.
since that's what led me to believe, to find everything out the first time. And I did start to see some things that were concerning, maybe by 2015, the following year.
Okay.
And at this point, I would just question him, like, what's going on with this and what's this? And,
Mm,
he would always deduce it to something that's not what it actually was, right?
okay.
And I think with infidelity, or at least my experience, even something is in your face and you see it and you know it and your gut tells you,
Yes.
you're going to, so I actually leaned into what he was saying, even though there might have been something else going on, right? So
Okay.
it's almost like I chose to believe what he was saying, even though the facts were different.
Okay. And with that, what do you think caused you to do that? Because knowing, because we were using the word toxic, right? And we know that toxic is something that is not good for you and is slowly killing you when we're talking about the physical. But there's that mental, there's that social, there's the spiritual. Um,
Right.
would you identify that as toxic? So the fact that those things that he was doing, and then what made you rely on his word versus what you were seeing?
I think I didn't want to believe what I was seeing,
Hmm.
right? And I think I also didn't want, I still was in the space of not wanting um, the reality of divorce and not
Okay.
being together. Um, I think seeing a lot of that growing up, like the fighting and the arguing. We weren't fighting. Let me rephrase that. We were not. There was no fighting, right? It was
Yes.
arguing, and
Uh-huh.
and uh, and even then, we were still careful not to do it around my son.
Okay.
But those disagreements, I guess, they
Hmm.
existed, and that's what I saw growing up. And my mom and my dad, he was still there until he just chose never to return, right? But it
Yes.
wasn't like she required him to be out the house and you leave, you go, right? So I think it was just
Mm.
a mixture
Okay.
of a lot of stuff, of just wanting it to work and not ready to give up, really.
Okay. And before we move on to the next segment, um, were there any red flags or warnings in the relationship that could have given you any notice that this would happen in your marriage?
I don't think there were, well, that's a loaded question.
No,
I,
it's things because it may be specific, right? It may
right,
be
right,
specific, like things like when this happened, I knew it's possible, but no, there was nothing, which is fine, and it can be that there was nothing
right,
there.
right.
Mhm.
I I don't know if there was any flags that pointed to the fact that I think he would have, there would have been infidelity in the relationship. But what I can say is I think, how relationship experts will say
Mm.
that it has to be two whole people, right,
Yes,
to come together. And
exactly.
it can't be, okay, you're not whole, but you're looking for someone else to make you whole, or
Mm,
they're looking to you to make you whole.
yes.
Um, I think if anything, that might have been, reason for pause because
Okay.
I was still very young.
Uh-huh.
I, I was in school, was just trying to, live life.
Uh-huh.
He was still in school. He was still very young. Again, he was going through a transition period. I don't think
Okay.
I can honestly say at that time, at that age, or even
Uh-huh.
with the things I had grown up with and the, childhood traumas, I don't think I was whole at all. So I think maybe I was looking for that whole family and, just
Mm,
the dynamic of living, in that house with the white picket fence with the children and the dog, and thinking that was the end result of life and that's what's going to
mm,
make us happy,
yeah.
um, was a misconception. So that's something I would say, there were obvious signs that neither of us, were really whole in ourselves. And
Okay,
maybe
that's a
that's a
good
red flag.
perspective. Not being home.
Yeah.
Now, if you can, and if it's something that's not going to be negative for him, because people look people up real fast. You keep saying transition. He was in a transition. Is that something that you can't share, or because what is that? If
I
you
mean,
can.
I think he was just changing his life as far as not necessarily, getting into, um, trouble,
Okay.
with the
Okay.
law, and really like, okay, that's not the life I want to live. I'm going to
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
stick with God, and I'm going to, you know, do the right thing in life, I guess, be a civil citizen.
Okay. Um, so what was the, like we usually say, what was the thing? I'm not even going to use the phrase. I'm going to say, what was the defining thing or moment for you, if you can identify it,
Hmm.
where you knew it's divorce and you were ready to make that phone call and move forward with the divorce? What was that? How did you end up making your mind from, nope, I want that perfect family, I want the picket
Hmm.
fence, I need the dog, the 4 children, and all of that? What for you made it, no, that's not ideal anymore?
I think when I came to the realization that I'm not crazy, like
Oh,
when I say
okay.
that, I mean a lot of, like when you see stuff and then you confront and then something
Yes.
else is shared, like the narrative is changed, and then you question yourself, you start to challenge yourself and say, okay, well, maybe it's really not that, but you don't know, right? So that constant mental battle. And
Mhm.
then also for me, it was um, feeling like I couldn't, or being told that, God only speaks through him and not directly to me.
Yes.
And there was a shift in, religious beliefs and spiritual
Yeah.
beliefs. And I think that for me was a big piece to say, okay, no, and then also making it okay to have multiple wives, which I was not okay with. So I
Oh,
think
okay. Wait,
those.
wait. You can't just drop that in there. So there ended up at some point. So this is more towards the time where um, you're saying that you got to that place where you knew that it was done. So there was a change in you guys's religious beliefs and where you
Right,
stood on that. Okay.
right,
And that shift, you mentioned something about multiple wives, and
right.
he started believing that.
Yes,
So
yes.
he
So I
went
want to
to a
say
different religion. Mhm.
exactly. So my beliefs never changed, right? It was always about Jesus and,
Yes.
uh, husband and wife, and, none of that uh, polygamous
Yes.
relationships, right? So I think I want to say, okay, so we get back to 2014. So I want to say it was 2017, which
Yes.
is when that changed. So even during that time, I thought I could still fight for my marriage, make it work,
Mm.
somehow convince him like the multiple wife things is not
Mm.
going to work.
Yes. Yes.
um, and so I think when I say like I finally started to think, okay, you're not crazy for wanting, you know, the things that you want in a marriage and a family,
Yes.
and you've come to the realization that you're not getting that, and it doesn't seem like you will get that,
Mm.
and God does love you, God does speak with you, And, you know, I started to think like, okay, I'm not crazy and this is not making sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone can
Mm-hmm.
only tell you that many lies, you know? And then I
Exactly.
think, so that was, I want to say around 2019.
Okay.
And then I remember my birthday. I just sat in my car and I think I like cried the whole night. And I was just processing and I was just screaming and talking to God, like,
Yes.
are you saying that you don't talk to me? Like I can only get to you through someone else that's doing different things that I don't agree with in the
Mm-hmm.
marriage. And I don't understand this. And it was a defining moment for me. And then I think my mental started to shift a little bit.
Okay.
Um, and then I remember seeing some more stuff and
Okay.
I asked about it and it was completely denied. And then the next day I looked again and
Uh-huh.
the question was presented to the person
Okay.
that was in the messages. And instead of being honest with me, like, yes, this is what happened, etc., he
Mm-hmm.
instead asked the other person, like, hey, did you talk to my wife?
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, I asked you, you said no, but you went back to the other person and said, hey, did you talk to her? Who that person was okay with having multiple, being a second or third wife, right?
Okay. Okay.
So when I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm really not crazy. This is just
Mm,
doesn't seem it's going to work. And how I knew, I think this is important, how I
yeah.
knew I was really done with
Okay.
everything in the
Mhm.
years of just the constant back and forth is because I finally revealed how I would see everything. Because up until that point,
Mm.
you never knew how I would find
Yes,
these messages or
exactly.
but I finally was because the minute you reveal your cover, right, things change,
They're gonna change
passwords,
it. Yeah,
etc.
they're gonna try to remove that, the access.
Exactly. So I was okay with that. I was like, this is how I knew. And at that point I knew I was done with everything and that it
Okay.
wasn't going to work.
Now, when you decided that you were done, um, what did you do next? How did you hire an attorney? I know we spoke at first,
Right.
but what was the thing that led you to calling me?
So I think first we spoke, I think it was maybe 2017 when this whole the multiple wives things were introduced.
Yes, yes,
And
we
then
did.
I went radio silent for a couple of years, right? So then in
Yes.
2019, when I finally came to the realization, okay, nothing has really changed and it
Hmm.
just seems to continue to get worse, is when I said, okay, I was done. And even when I confronted him and revealed everything,
Yes.
I still didn't immediately call an attorney. But I knew deep down that I was done, and I did say, "Please leave." Right, and I
Okay.
think it took about another 60 days for him to, leave the home. And then
Yes.
I think I kind of sat in that space for a little bit,
Yes.
and then I think I called the best attorney ever, everyone. I called Attorney Jay, and that's when we started the process. I think it was, I want to
Okay.
say early 2020 or late
Yes.
2019, early 20, I think it's early 2020.
Early 2020 is when we started having a conversation. So
Mhm.
this is obviously it's a little weird because it's me. It's not like I'm talking about a third person, but I'm not gonna again, like I said, this is one a free space, a non-judgment zone, but it's also a non-assumption space. Okay.
Right.
So the thoughts that you had about marriage, the thoughts that you had about, talking to a divorce attorney and all that, how was my approach different than what you expected? When we were now having conversation about actually divorce.
I think for me, it was, compassion. And if I can summarize it in two words, I would say compassion and strategy, right?
Mm,
Because, it's, a divorce is obviously, especially with my history and my childhood and
yeah.
environment, what I wanted in life. And then finally coming to the realization and acceptance that, okay, this is kind of really where you are with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're moving on to another step that's very difficult and emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
But having an attorney that was extremely compassionate to the situation and um, really equipping me with strategy to be able to navigate it,
Yeah.
I think, you know, I had never gone through a divorce before. So I think what I all I can expect is what I see on TV. And one of my favorite shows was Matlock. So, he
Yes.
was in there. It was just always, a lot of chaos and stuff. So I think that's that's what set my experience apart from what I may have expected. There was so much compassion, understanding, um, and strategy, and a lot of nuggets giving to me so I can navigate and have a strategy just for life, period. Right. Because it's such a difficult time. And then I not only have to be strong, I have a child that has to,
Yes.
is also going through everything. So like really, coming to the realization, like you have to, you have to, and you will get through this as long as
Yeah.
you have the strategy.
Was there any moment throughout the divorce process where it became um, difficult or that was significant where having this approach, because like I mentioned, my approach to divorce primarily is to not add to the chaos, to not
Right.
add to the toxicity, to not use divorce as this
Weapon.
thing that I'm going to get revenge from. That's what I know
Right.
my approach is, but it doesn't mean that clients connect to my approach all the time.
Right.
So, was there, with my whole idea in my mind of divorce different, was there anything throughout, like a time in that
Mhm.
process, in your divorce process, where the guidance that I gave you with the mindset of divorcing different, and having your purpose in mind, that stood out to you, like meaning it was an area where this is getting difficult, and then that thought process kind of helped in the representation.
Sure. Well, so two things stand out, right? So there was a period in the divorce where my ex-husband was taking very long with the paperwork, right? So he's taking very long, and you had to file a motion to expedite things. And
Yeah.
I remember the judge being very, tough.
Yeah.
And but somehow, your compassion still came through that moment, right? Because
Mhm.
my ex texted me and said, "Hey, I'm gonna do the paperwork. Okay, just give me some time. I'm gonna get everything done." And we were still there's still messages between us because of course we have a son, but the
Yeah.
fact that he took the moment to not say other things and just say, "Hey,
Like bash
I'm gonna
me
get it done,"
as your
right? It's
attorney.
like,
No good.
okay, yeah, and then you're my attorney, and I don't believe he was represented by someone, so this is like,
No.
he came that experience, he came through and was very amicable and was like, wow, okay, yeah, thank you. So that was one way where I think even your compassion and your professionalism showed in that moment. So it's like an extension of me, right? So you're
Yes.
representing me, and
And that is a
and
big deal. Hmm.
exactly. So it carried over to a message, and it remained amicable in that moment. And then I think, I don't know at what point, but I know we had a conversation about just you, right? Like focusing on you,
Yeah.
and how are you going to get through this, because you have to get through this.
Yeah.
And just reminding me that there's life after this, right? There's life after. It was a a, a very and I don't want to say intense conversation, but it was a very important and
Hmm.
milestone conversation throughout the process, because we had a lot of those
Yes.
conversations. And somehow, it clicked for me. It's like, no, I'm not out to be, let me take him to the cleaners and let me do this, let me do
Yeah.
that. I just need to navigate this process with strategy and, move along, because there's life after this, and you're going to get through this, and you're going to be on the other side. So that was life changing. That's when I want to say I probably let go of stuff.
Mhm. Now, I think a question people may have is, now, what was your financial situation? Were you making more? Was he making more? Like, what did that look like
So
in that
going into
process?
it, so throughout the marriage, I always made more, right? Because I
Okay.
was trying to
Hmm.
climb the corporate ladder, of course,
Yes.
and um, going into it, I was making more for sure in the marriage, but then it couldn't have come at the worst time. But
Hmm.
and if you
Open.
think of the dates that I said, right, we
Yeah.
kicked off this process January 2020, and everyone
Mhm.
knows what happened in March 2020.
Yes.
COVID happened, and I was unfortunately affected by that in the professional setting where I was laid off. First furloughed, right, because I think
Yes.
everyone was furloughed because no one really knew what was to come, what's happening. It is just temporary. But then ultimately got the call like midpoint in the divorce. I think it was in June, and I was laid off.
Mm.
So, everything I had saved, and thank God there were savings there, right? That had to carry
Mm.
me through for a long period of time until I, you know, got back on my feet and the world was safe and hospitality was booming again. And,
Yes.
I can get back in the professional setting and back out to work. And even during that time,
Yeah.
'cause you can revert back and say, oh, okay, well, this is too hard. I'm not working. He is. Let me just get back together and
That's a big
I,
deal.
I
Yep.
still, push through again. I think that was, of course, with your support and guidance through this process.
So, one thing, being completely transparent, Divorce Like a Boss, the book that I wrote, throughout
Hmm.
that process, you and I were communicating, and I did end up telling you that you were, because when you're writing a book, you have to think of your ideal reader. Like, who's this person that you want to get this message to? And I did tell you that you were that person. Like, you were
Right.
my person that Divorce Like a Boss was written to. Like, this was, what do you want to say, my empowerment letter, love letter, whatever it is, but this is
Right.
a message to you. This is not a shameless plug, but this is real life because it ended up being a part of your life. Now,
Right.
Divorce Like a Boss was published after
Hmm.
your divorce was, or right after your
Right.
divorce was finalized. And before I get into that, um, how did the process end? Were you guys able to end it amicably? Like what?
No,
How,
we were able to, I think the day everything was finalized, it was still virtual because
yes.
COVID was still going on. And, I found it in me to text and say, thank you for everything. I hope we can continue to be great parents to our son. And then he responded, thank you for sure. Definitely want to be there and support however I can. If you need me, please let me
Mhm.
know. And I was like, but I was like, okay, so it was still, um, you know, a, a smooth and seamless process. We were able to move past that.
Okay, and that's good because I do remember communicating with him, and he was open. 'Cause I know at one point he wasn't, but he ended up communicating with me. We got everything accomplished. So that is a good that's a good it's a that
Hmm.
process. We're talking about the process, not the fact that you went through it. But
Right.
how did divorce, since you're the ideal reader, how did Divorce Like a Boss really resonate with you on the other side? Because you were now just fresh out of your divorce, still going through the emotions and everything. How did it resonate with you?
I think for me, because the book, that's another time where, because let me pull back for a second, right?
Yes.
So when there are times where even if you have strategy, right, there will be
Mm-hmm.
some type of obstacle that you're faced with, and it's trying to derail you from that strategy, right? And
Yes.
if you're not careful to ensure that you get right back on it, on the
Mm-hmm.
train of growth or continuing on or pressing forward, then you can easily derail and just fall back into what's not conducive to what you're trying to do.
Yes.
So I think for me, the book came at the perfect time. I think I want to say it was right after, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like right,
It was
everything
right
was
after.
finalized and it was around the holidays, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let me get my
December
hands.
2020. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's golden, right? It's what I needed to really allow myself to really turn that corner, right?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to go through the process, it's one thing to know that it's finalized, but then you're kind of faced with it's almost like grief, right? They say
Yes.
when you're facing grief, it pokes its head out at different times.
Mm-hmm.
And either you deal with it or you wait. It's going to wait for you to be ready to deal with it. But at some point, you're going to have to deal with it,
Yeah.
regardless if you to or not. So it helped me really focus on me. Like, okay, here you are, life after divorce. What are you going to do? You know, will I ever find love again? It helped me answer a lot of those questions. It's a broken family. Like, there'll be days where I won't have my son during the holidays, or I won't have him,
Mm-hmm.
for special moments, and I won't be able to see those things. And that house with the white picket fence, and it won't be. It's not. It's no longer what I thought. So dealing with that reality was very difficult. But the book, like, really helped me navigate my emotions, if I
Mm.
can sum it up, right? And somewhere in the book, it talks about,
Okay, so
really,
my next question was
okay,
if there was a chapter or lesson that you got from.
yes,
So now go and answer what you were gonna say.
it was I want to say it was either friend or foe, right? The
Yes,
realities of divorce, because I had already gone through it, right?
yes.
But the one part in the book, it talks about like your mindset. And
Mm.
divorce is something that is so hard. And especially when if you have children, when you go through it, right, your mind will play so much tricks on you. It'll tell you
Mhm.
things, and the emotions will come out. But it talked a lot about really gaining control of your mindset, and
Yes.
not letting your emotions take control of you,
Mm.
right?
That's a line directly out of
That
the
is
book. Yes.
such a nugget, that's such a gem. Um, those are powerful words, right? Because, like they say, everyone's one step away from a decision, right? And sometimes a bad
Mm.
decision, right?
Yes,
And sometimes that bad decision is stemmed from emotion. So if you don't pull back and not allow you can feel them, right? You
of
can
course,
process them,
of
but you
course.
definitely don't want them to go out of control.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not going to be conducive for you to grow and thrive and move forward. So I think that was a section or part that really, really stood out to me to keep going, right? So
Yeah.
I cried, right? When those emotions surfaced, I cried,
Yeah.
I prayed, and I was like, okay, what's the strategy? Because the strategy is pointed out a lot in the book. And I was like, okay, well, how am I going to get through this portion?
Yes.
And with each different, uh, I guess I don't want to say my time frame, like if you're looking at a
Yes.
timeline with each different points of navigating life after divorce, right?
Yes.
There were those moments of the emotions taking over, and like me resetting myself and recentering myself to say, okay, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to pray through this, and I'm going to strategize to be able to move past this. And that was one of the best nuggets I could ever take from that.
You mentioned about having a child throughout this process, and we know that you have. And you're already struggling with divorce, then after
Mm-hmm.
divorce. So I want you to share a little bit about what that experience was like, specifically with dealing with your child and divorce.
So it was very hard because, no child really wants their parents to, go their separate ways. They deal with a lot as well through the
Yeah.
process. I think moments that really broke my heart was doing like the transfer of the child.
Mm,
And
yes.
I think there was a day where it was raining,
Mhm.
and he's running from my car to my ex-husband's car, and
Yeah.
he's just with a little bag in his hand with the little toys that
Mm,
meant something to him, right?
yes.
So um, those moments were very hard, right? So I
Yeah.
think our parenting styles are different, right?
Okay.
Um, our beliefs have now become different. So I think that was one of the big challenges. And as much as I wanted to say, I don't care. It's my way. You do what you want to do in your house. I'll do what I want to do in my house. And while that's very important, I had to
Yeah.
be the parent to yield and say, okay, because I didn't want to see my son being tugged hard so many different
Exactly.
ways, right? Because unfortunately, it wasn't a setting where I could really do that
Hmm.
and say, it doesn't matter, you're doing this, and I'm not saying that parents shouldn't hold the line and, have their own set of rules in their home and et cetera.
Exactly.
But for me, um, I had to pull back for a little bit, and I had to um, allow, his style and his beliefs to really be what was presented to my son, and then I was not to say I wasn't fighting. I was fighting differently. I was fighting through prayer. I was
Yes.
fighting through prayer. I was fighting through
Mm,
fasting. I was fighting through
that's what's
journaling.
important.
And then, it was rocky. There were times where, of course, I was blamed for the divorce from my
Mm.
son. I was, told that it's
Was
my
that, would you
fault.
say that's the biggest challenge that you ended up facing while trying to help him process the blaming?
And
What would be
actually,
the
the
biggest
biggest
challenge?
challenge that I faced with parenting, that was the biggest challenge for me to have to
Okay.
hear that when I know that's not really was the case, right?
Okay.
But then I can't say, well, no, it's not. It's because of your daddy and this. And I
Yeah.
can't necessarily say those things,
And you
right? I
chose
mean, I
not to,
can, but
right?
it's
Yeah.
exactly I
Chose not
can,
to.
but I chose not to because
Hmm.
for what for, right? It's not going to benefit him in any way to know that okay, all these things happen. So I had to protect them in that sense. However, I would say the hardest thing was when my son went through depression and
Mm.
even harming himself and even having
Wow.
to be Baker acted and just feeling like completely lost. And as a
Hmm.
parent, you're supposed to protect your children.
Exactly.
And just feeling that I didn't do that in that moment. So trying to help him navigate his emotions while I
Yeah.
still had mine, I would say is probably one of the hardest things divorced parents face.
And was this during or this was after the divorce?
This was
All
after.
after the
Well, I would
divorce.
say a little bit during as well too, but I think the
The brunt of it was after,
after,
right?
correct,
Mhm.
exactly.
And when navigating and trying to help him process while you're processing, was there anything from Divorce Like a Boss that helped you with that process of dealing with him, communicating with him, or helping him in that?
It's really the part that talks about the emotions, right? Because it's such an
Mm,
emotional roller coaster, right?
yes,
So when I am angry because of whatever belief is instilled with him in that moment, or
yes.
my son will come home and say different things, or I would think that's just not the way, it really
Mhm.
is. And I could choose to, engage in a debate right there, or I can choose to, find different ways to drop those nuggets to
Mm,
ultimately get my point across, right? So you it I had to be very, very, very strong to
mm,
navigate emotions, but it
yes.
was that constant reminder, like what's better right now to let your emotions come out and say, no, that's not what it is, and no, let me tell you,
Mhm.
or pause, center yourself, take
Yes.
control,
Mhm.
and navigate it the best way that you can. So I think that's what really stood out. That's probably the most important section for me.
Yes.
That whole mindset section. One of the two, I would
Yeah.
say.
What advice would you give? Because now, how is it now? So before we even get to that advice, um, was there anything in particular that you specifically did that helped him? And how is your son now? Now that you're 4 years removed,
Well,
going on five.
we did. Yes, we did. Wow, 5 years. Time flies. I promise I blinked,
Yeah.
and it's 5 years now. I would say, well, we did counseling for sure.
Okay. Was
Um,
that when you say counseling, is it individual for him? Was it group, family counseling?
It was individual for him,
Okay.
right? It was individual for him. So he did counseling. There was one, I could say, couple, not want to say couple, but family session, like myself
Okay.
and him, but my ex wasn't there.
Okay.
So that was really make it family, but it was like mother son session. Um, but I think it was more so, I think I learned to listen to him. That would be
Mm,
something that I really realized, right? Like really listen to him and really understand where he's coming from, right? Because I was
yeah.
still like, I'm the mom, and you know, what your dad does is what he does, what I do is
Yeah.
what I do. And even though I found different ways to really drop those gems, I don't know that
Mm,
I really listened, right? Like
mhm.
sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, I'm always late sometimes. So
Oh,
in the morning, I'll give you an example, right? In the
uh-huh.
morning, like I'll take that extra time to sleep for 10 minutes and then I'm rushing, right? So then that energy and that anxiety like carries over to him. So I'm like, get
Oh.
up, let's go, we gotta go, come on, come on, come on, come on, right? And then
Mhm.
to him, I was screaming and yelling all the time,
Oh, wow.
right? When I,
Mhm.
I really wasn't. I gotta go. I gotta get to work. I gotta get back home fast. I gotta come back and
Mhm.
pick you up. And I say, like, come on, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. Right. So I think really pausing to listen to some of the things that he was really saying, and then doing like mommy Sundates and going
Mm,
to dinner once a week or movies and
yeah.
really listening to him because again, I'm a very busy bee, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes I get home, I open my computer and I have to continue on with work that I didn't finish because I had to run home
Yeah.
and business clients and I'm working on that. So he sometimes would be speaking to me and I'm listening, but I'm not listening. And he's
Mm,
told me, like, you never listen to me, mom. So I think pausing and really listening to him really changed the
yeah.
dynamic of our relationship, but also praying through everything. I have such a strong village of friends who prayed for me through the process.
Yeah.
Um, and just, finding better ways to communicate, I think really helped that.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, he's doing great. He's a great soccer player. He scored his first
Yeah.
goal yesterday in a game and he was so
Woo!
happy. So I'm so happy for him.
That's
He's
awesome.
thriving in school, right? He has a like was 3.5 GPA now.
Look
He's
at
in high
that.
school
That's
now.
amazing.
So God is so good. I'm so blessed that, you know, in the moment when I was going through it, it just seemed like the most difficult thing. And
I
I don't know how I'm going to
remember.
get through this. And like the world is over and I can't believe this. But to see where we are now, it's just a constant reminder for anyone that's going through anything difficult, right? Just keep pressing through, keep
Yeah.
praying through. If you have a village that can pray with you, pray for you, fast with you, just keep pushing forward because to see where we are now compared to where we were, God is so faithful.
God is faithful. Listen, God is so good. I remember just
Yes.
praying and encouraging in prayer and sending scriptures and preachings. And
Yes,
I thank God. God is amazing. So now
yes.
you are about to be 5 years. So we're a full 4 years, about to be 5 years removed. How has your life changed from where you were there mentally? Like what has changed for
I
you?
think mentally I'm doing very well, right? Mentally, like if I had to summarize it, I have to say life is great, right? And not
Mm,
because I'm out of the situation, right? But
yeah.
because I've really recentered myself and I, focused on me, right?
Mm,
Trying to get to the place of being whole and
yeah.
really being in tune with my spiritual life and, really connecting with myself, I would say. Um, I've always wanted to go back to school when I
Yeah.
was in the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally got my master's degree in employment law from FSU that
Woo!
helps contribute to, knowledge that I need for navigating the choppy HR waters. I have created founded the business. I can say the HR firm that I have
Yes,
and
which is
really
an
supporting.
awesome firm. Shameless plug. That is who we use. That's who we use. But my law firm, and we recommend it to everyone because no, it is important. So that I
Yes.
witness. Yes. Mhm.
Yes, yes. And, just having a great relationship with my son. I have to say life is really, really good. There are those times where you I can say this. There are the periods that are difficult for me
Yeah.
sometimes are like holidays, right?
Mm,
Because I think everything started around the holiday for me when I finally made a decision, okay, I'm going to go through this. And I called you in January
yeah.
2020. And then I think everything was officially final like December of 2020.
Yeah.
And then it was like the realization, like, okay, you're no longer married, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think when you see like the pajama families during the
Mm,
holidays or
yes.
it's cold and it's like, I think back to that little girl that sat in my living room and wanting that, right? Wanting
Yeah.
the house with the kids and the dog, and then seeing like, that's not necessarily your story, but it doesn't take away from what your story is and what you do have. Because there's so much for me there's so much that I can be thankful for
Yes.
and, again, it's that constant mental battle, right? You just have to go back and battle, those emotions and make sure you remember to be grateful for everything, just being alive and healthy. And my son being alive and healthy and thriving is something to be grateful for.
That is definitely something to be grateful for. So what is the biggest personal or professional challenge that you had in rebuilding? So this period of time of rebuilding what you knew your normal was going to be to what it is now. Can you identify any?
I I would say Personally, I think the thought of the broken home, right?
Mm,
That's constantly that thought will come as like, you have a broken home. Um,
mm.
so that is a challenge, I can say.
What
Like not
about with
having
your
my son
son? What about
with my
timing, like timing with your son, scheduling? Like, did that
so
get
that
impacted at all?
so I would say that's yes, for sure. So more so trying to be there for everything, right? Because
Mm,
again, my ex-husband, he's not local, he travels. So
mm.
sometimes I am the parent that has to be there.
Yeah.
And being in the corporate setting, sometimes, that has I'm not going to say sometimes, I'm going to say all the time, that has a major demand on your life and just work life. So I would say trying to find that balance
Uh-huh.
and also professionally not like navigating those emotions. Like I may have an emotional reaction to something that I thought of and I'm,
Yes,
crying or I'm sad or I'm angry, but I still have to go to work,
that's true.
right? I still have to go to work. And
Yeah.
what am I going to do? I still have to, help other employees at work navigate different things that may be also complex and difficult. So there are times where I have to pause and like reset, handle those things, and then come back and then close my door, then cry, then come
Mm,
back and do it again, right? So life doesn't
yeah.
stop just because professional life doesn't stop just because I had that reaction this morning. And
Wow.
my son's life doesn't stop just because I am the parent, the one parent that's present, right?
Yes.
So I have to find ways to balance. And, if I have to leave work 30 minutes early because I got to make it to a soccer game, I have to leave work 30 minutes early and I have to make it to the soccer
Mm,
game. We'll be
yep.
present, right? Or if I have to take a day off and we're going to make it a 3-day weekend, we're going to travel to Orlando and have some fun. That's what we're going to do, right? So just so you know
Mm.
that, I'm still present. And just because mommy's very busy doesn't mean that he's not important as well.
Now, what about the opposite side of that? Were there things that you had to miss because of work? And how are you able to navigate that? Or have you come to grips with this is just a part?
Well, I try not to. So, okay, here's the funny story, right? So, when
Uh-huh.
my son was 6, okay, I
Yeah.
missed his, it might have been a graduate, I think it was an honor roll ceremony because he's always
Yeah.
getting an honor roll, which is
Yes.
amazing.
Which
But,
is awesome.
and you know how when they're so young, they put the paper in their book bag, but they don't
Yes.
send the email. Long story short, he gave me the paper so late. And the next day I
Mhm.
had a training at work and I could not miss that training because I was facilitating that training.
Yes.
My ex-husband could not miss work, right?
Hmm.
So um I remember him sitting like maybe months after sitting in the car, we were driving, and he said,
Uh-huh.
Mommy, why did you miss my graduation? And I said, What is he talking about? I didn't miss your graduation. Remember, we all were there, everything was
Yeah.
great. And he says, No, you missed my graduation. I was like, No. And then as he continued talking, I realized he was talking about the honor roll ceremony.
Mm.
And I said, Oh, well, remember you gave me the form so late, which was probably horrible to say, but I got the form so late and I just, I couldn't miss work that day and I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna make sure to be there, moving forward. And he's like, okay. And he's silent. And
Mhm.
I'm also silent because I don't know what else to say. And he said, next time, tell your mom, not your mom, tell your boss that you're graduating and you can't come. Basically telling me to tell my boss you cannot miss your kid's
Miss another.
graduation.
Wow.
And I said, okay, you're right. I I will do that. I went to work. I dropped them off to summer camp. I went to
Yeah.
work and I was like, let me tell you what my 6-year-old just told me. And we all laughed about it. But the next, maybe less than 2 months later, he's again, here we are at the honor roll, right? School starts,
Mm.
makes the first honor roll. I run to my boss. I say, I have to make this. I cannot make this. I cannot have my son telling me, you missed this again. And she's like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead. I was like, I'm going to come in late. And I went to the ceremony and the principal, after they call all the students' name, the principal says, look out into the crowd. You see those people? Those are your parents and family. It's because of them that, you're here today. So go and
Mhm.
give them a big hug. And my son came, he gave me a big hug. And, we took pictures, we smiled. And
Mhm.
he's like, hi, mommy, whatever. And he went back to class. I went to work. When I got in the car, I cried all the way to work. And I live
Wow.
in Broward, work in
Right.
South Beach. I
And that's
cried
about
because
how long? You got to give it. Not everybody is from Broward and Miami.
oh
That's how
Lord,
much
on a
minutes to
good
cry.
day, maybe in rush hour traffic, maybe an hour and a half.
Wow.
So like an hour, 15 to hour and a half
Yeah.
sometimes. So I realized that when the principal said, go out and hug your family, and everyone's family is there, parents bring
Yeah.
flowers
Yeah.
and balloons and teddy
Hmm.
bears. I can only think back to what he experienced when we weren't there.
Oh,
And he's
wow.
thinking, because
Girl, you
that's
give me
why
chills.
months later he told
Yes.
me. So I said, he had to walk down that long hallway back to class with no family, no mom, no dad there to,
Oh, wow.
give him a hug and say good job. So I
Mhm.
really try not to miss anything. Is it hard? Absolutely, because I'm one person and I have to juggle a lot, but
And you're
I use
corporate.
my
We
calendar,
have to keep saying that you're corporate so we know the expectations and then
right?
your HR. So it's just coming nonstop, nonstop, nonstop to you.
Exactly, right. The demands are super high with the professional setting. So, um, but yeah, it's a balance. I have to juggle. I try to use my calendar. I try to, use the different days, come in later,
Mhm.
um, or leave earlier just so I don't miss different things. But I've so far I've done really well.
That we applaud you. Listen, tap on the back for all of us trying to do this work, build empires, and raise these young children. So, no,
Exactly.
kudos to you and no judgment at all. Um, so, as we close out, I have a few more questions. So, what's the most valuable lesson that you learned from your divorce experience that you would want others to receive and kind of take with them, those who are facing or navigating divorce right now?
I would say that life goes on,
Hmm.
right? Because I think in that moment of realizing like this is the reality and you're wanting to make this decision, or maybe the decision was told to you, right? Maybe it could be the other person that's
Yeah.
demanding or requesting a divorce. When you come to that realization that this is what's going to happen and you're going through the process of it happening, and
Hmm.
then it's happened, and then you're kind of at that space like, my life is different now. Just know that, life goes on, right? You have to find you and you have to recenter yourself to really, go on and do the things that you want to do or couldn't do before, or be healthy, be in that space of great mental health so you can move forward and continue on with life, right? Because I hate to sound, I hate to minimize, the
Yeah.
marriage, because it's not what I'm doing, but it is a chapter in your whole life,
Yeah.
right? You know, um, and you don't want that experience to, you know, create an entire negative experience for the rest of your life, right? So if you're looking at it
Yes.
in the format of a book, right?
Yeah.
If you think about your early childhood, that's a few chapters. If you think about your marital life, that's a few chapters. But then what about
Hmm.
after,
Yeah.
right? Does the book end, or do you continue on writing your
Well,
story?
that's a
So,
good analogy. That's
oh.
awesome. That's definitely encouraging words because some people are struggling. Some people are struggling
Yes,
even with the thought of it, the fear of the unknown. Was
right,
that something for you, even the unknown? Because
right,
that limits so much people. But knowing that we don't want to stop our book before it's done. No
right.
cliffhangers, right? No cliffhangers of life.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
some final thoughts. What's next for you personally and professionally?
For me, this year I'm working towards home ownership, right? That's, as you
All
know, at
right.
my story, I've always wanted the home, and
Yes.
wanted to have that comfortable space, where you get to relax and call your own. So I'm working towards that this year,
Yes.
and continuing to expand my HR consulting firm, right? I've been
Yeah.
in corporate for a very long time. I have so much experience, and I definitely want to take my business, which is called the HR Formula Group,
Yeah.
to the next level, and eventually leave corporate and continue on supporting the smaller businesses so that they can have that corporate knowledge that I've learned over these last 2 decades.
And how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your journey or your business?
So for my business, my social media pages at the HR Formula Group, right? So I'm on IG, LinkedIn, and Facebook, but it's
Uh-huh.
Miss_Shersher.
Okay.
That's it.
MS_SHERSHER.
Exactly.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us on Faces of Divorce, sharing your being so transparent and sharing your experience and the lesson. There's so many lessons in this, but the thing that you believe people should take away, if you can give it 2 words or a statement, what is it that people should take away from your experience or what you've learned throughout this process?
No, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this amazing platform and sharing the experience. And, I know I thanked you multiple times for being such an amazing attorney and helping me navigate this and even writing the book, right? But a lesson that I would share or anything that I would want them to take away, if I can sum everything up, would be actually from your book, right? So
Oh,
it
okay.
says, love is priceless yet precious, right? Make sure you give it wisely, but give it often, right? So don't let, the negativity of divorce, stain love, right?
Mm.
Love continues, life goes on. Continue to give the love, but, make it sure that you're being wise with it.
Oh,
That's from your
oh,
book.
and we didn't plan that. You quoted the book. Thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
this is Faces of Divorce with Attorney J, our guest, Charlene Lexim, HR extraordinaire. The HR Formula Group is absolutely amazing. And our goal is to have people divorce different. Let's not break down our community. There is a way to navigate divorce strategically with your purpose in mind. We are going from toxic to triumph. And see you at the next show. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So that was good.
Awesome. That was
Um,
great.